Hey guys, welcome to this video. I'm going to take you through everything you need about non-verbal communication and non-verbal behaviour for your psychology GCSE here. We're going to go through the definitions of the keywords, then we're going to talk about the main types of non-verbal behaviour that come up in the exam, and those are eye contact, postures, personal space, and this includes the factors that affect personal space. Alright, so first of all, let's get some clarification over some keywords. In a previous video, I talked about the word communication. You've got to get into a good habit of not using the word communicate or talk. It's a bit basic to define this word. So we always like to describe it as conveying information or passing messages from one person to another. Now, we're talking about non-verbal communication and non-verbal behaviour in this video. So it is quite common to get questions that ask about the difference between verbal communication and non-verbal communication. So all we're going to do is we're going to take the beginning of the definition of communication, which is that idea of conveying information and conveying and sharing messages, and we're just going to add a little bit to the end. So verbal communication is when you convey messages with words and sounds, and non-verbal communication is when you're going to convey messages without words or sounds. So that's a really nice clear difference on those two words there. Okay, the first type of non-verbal communication that you're going to get asked about in an exam could be eye contact. Now, I haven't got a definition of eye contact here, but the one thing that I would really stress to you is that when you're defining eye contact, you've got to mention that it has to involve two people. It's when two people look at each other's eyes. Like we kind of joke in lessons, if it's just one person looking at somebody else's eyes, that gets a bit creepy. In order for it to be eye contact, the exam wants you to say two people looking at each other's eyes. Now, where the exam will take the questioning about eye contact is it's going to ask about the purpose, the functions of eye contact. And there are three main ones that you can note for your exam. So the first one is that having eye contact gives a nice smooth flow to the conversation. Basically, what we do know is that if you block eye contact, it increases the number of pauses and interruptions in a conversation, and it breaks up the flow of the conversation. We also know that eye contact will signal turn-taking in a conversation. So when we really slow down footage of people having a conversation, we have noticed that people tend to do a bit of a micro expression with their eyes, and they very quickly look away when they're about to finish talking or that when it's somebody else's turn to talk. And finally, eye contact can signal attraction. So basically what we often do is we will sort of engage in eye contact if we find somebody attractive. So those are your three main functions of eye contact for the exam. And the way that this is often going to come up in an exam question is it's going to combine it with a bit of research methods, and it might ask you to design a study to investigate one of the functions of eye contact. Easiest one to investigate is the idea of the smooth flow, because what we can really easily do is block eye contact in a lab setting. So look at the layout of the question here, 3 bullet points, but each bullet point makes it really, really clear on what you've got to do. So design a study to investigate one function of eye contact. You must include what function of eye contact you're investigating and the task you will get your participants to do, the results you expect to get, and finally the experimental design you will choose and one reason you chose this design. So the main thing is the first bullet point here. First of all, I want to make sure that you know kind of what kind of task to go for. So I said it's easiest to go for the smooth flow and conversation function, and the easiest way to do that is to have people have a conversation and pair them up and have them sometimes block eye contact. So maybe pop some dark glasses on or a blindfold on, and then you're going to have another group of participants having conversations with no blindfold. So that way you've got your clear difference, you've got your clear difference in your variable, and you've got a clear set of conditions. One group having conversations with blocked eye contact and one group having normal conversations. Then you'd go into your results. So we're just going to expect that if they do not have dark glasses on, there's going to be less pauses and interruptions in their conversation. And then for this one, we have to choose an experiment to design and justify it. So I was going to say I'm going to go for an independent groups design here, and then just justify in green. So I'm going to say, because it will remove order effects from the experiment, as I'm not using the participants twice, so they should not figure out the aim, the study, or get tired. So that's a nice way that they like to ask about eye contact. Okay, the next part of non-verbal behaviour that they could ask about is posture, different types of posture. I'm just going to run through the three main types of posture that you need to know. The first two you probably know really well. Open posture. This is very much the posture when people's arms are wide open. That shows that they're comfortable, they're happy, they're quite content, and they're fairly chilled out with the situation that they are in. The second one is the opposite, which is the closed posture. This is normally when their arms are crossed over their body, kind of guarding themselves, protecting themselves. It does show that they're quite uncomfortable and unhappy in whatever situation they are in. And finally, the extra one is the postural echo. This is when your posture mirrors somebody else. It's often done unconsciously. You don't realise that you're doing it, but it does signify and sort of show a really strong relationship between two people. Now, this is again another quite common question which will combine with research methods, where they might ask you to design or conduct a study into posture and the effect it has on other people's opinions of us. And again, the question follows the same pattern, but I'm just going to talk you through sort of like a little description of a method that you might use. For this one, the best way to go about it is probably just to get a confederate in and ask that confederate to walk up to people in the street and ask them a question, but get that confederate to sometimes use an open posture and sometimes to use a closed posture. And then you're going to ask the participant who didn't really know they were in a study what they thought of your participant. In that design, the sampling method is going to be a opportunity sample, and the question here also asks for an extraneous variable which may affect your results. Easiest one for me here is the person that you're using. If you change person, that could definitely affect the results, and it could be nothing to do with the posture. So we're going to use the same person, the same confederate every time, and get them to ask the same question in the same style, so that the participant's opinion is just down to the posture. Okay, the final bit of non-verbal communication is personal space. So personal space refers to the distance between you and another person that feels comfortable. That's quite an important definition. I've put the word distance in bold and underlined it because that's definitely the word that they want. That's the word that they'll be looking for here. Personal space is always to do with distance between you and somebody else. It's nothing to do with how well you're getting on with somebody, how comfortable, just sort of like you look together. It's to do with the distance between you and somebody else. It's very specific, very measurable. It's very scientific and very psychological. So the way that this is going to come up in the exam, you could get asked to define the word, but you're more than likely going to get asked about some factors which affect personal space. So I'm just going to run you through the key factors that the exam will be looking for. So first one is culture. And this is a very simple idea that we would prefer to stand closer to people of our own culture. It's just a simple fact. We're more comfortable. It's what we know. That's what we would prefer to do. Secondly is gender. We typically feel more comfortable standing closer to the same sex. So boys typically prefer standing closer to boys, and girls typically prefer standing closer to other girls. Status, this is more to do with like power and authority. So we feel more comfortable standing closer to someone who has the same authority as us. So students prefer standing closer to other students as opposed to standing closer to teachers, for example, because different status, different power and different authority. Final one is age. We typically feel more comfortable standing closer to someone who is a similar age to us. So nothing too complicated, nothing too difficult there, but you've just got to remember that other things that you would expect to affect personal space will not get you marks. So if you were to say like how smelly a person is or how dirty or clean somebody is, whilst I appreciate that's not necessarily wrong, it's not a psychological factor. That's a physical factor. So it's not going to get you a mark in the exam. So try and stick to culture, gender, status, and age. Now, again, you're quite likely to get a research method question here. So how would I go about answering a research methods and designing a research methods question into personal space? We need to come up with something to do with measuring distance. That was that really important keyword at the start. We've got to come up with how close two people stand next to each other. So just going to share with you a little method that I might use here. So if I was going to investigate how gender affects personal space, I would need a town bench and a male and female confederate. That's going to be my gender factor. I'm then going to have the male confederate sit on the bench for an hour, and then the female confederate do the same afterwards. So I've got it all set up. I've got a bench, I've got a male and female to do the gender test. That should all work out. What I'm then going to do for the next hour, or 2 hours, I'm going to observe the members of the public who sit on the bench, and I'm going to measure how far away they sit from the confederate. So very specifically, once they've upped and moved away, we're going to go and, sounds silly, but it's only scientific way of doing it. We're going to get the tape measure out, and we're going to measure how far away they sat from our confederate. And we're going to expect that members of the same sex would sit closer to the confederates compared to the members of the opposite sex. So same sex would sit closer to the same sex confederate compared to the opposite sex. So that's a little run through of non-verbal communication and non-verbal behaviour, the main types, the main definitions, and how to sort of apply it into the research methods questions, which were really popular in this section.